Pod SaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in SaaSy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
Welcome to Pod SaaS. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we have Mark Bakker from TIMIA Capital. How's it going?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining us. So before we go into what we kind of do, which is like a series of rapid fire questions, get to know you as an individual, but tell us a little bit about TIMIA Capital and the kind of companies that you guys work with.
So TIMIA Capital primarily invests into B2B SaaS companies between 2 and 20 million ARR, and it's non-dilutive, so essentially debt. So we don't take any equity stake in the business. We're doing loans to companies between $1 and $5 million, typically for them to grow their business. So they get to retain ownership and control of the business, get access to the cash that they need to deploy their growth plan. We get paid a small amount at the end of the day. That's good for our investors. That's basically how it works.
What kind of like the size deals do you guys typically do in terms of like these loans? What's the range?
Yeah, so smallest check size we do is $500,000, up to 5 million, sometimes 6 million into one company. We are roughly like $60 million of assets under management at the moment.
Got it. Very cool. Love to talk about the journey in terms of how you guys started TIMIA. But before we get there, have a series of rapid fire questions, no particular order. So we're just going to go ahead and shoot if you're ready for them.
Go for it.
Cool. First question is very easy. But who's your favorite entrepreneur or a startup story that you really admire?
So favorite entrepreneur, I actually worked for him for a couple of years, Jonathan Siegel. He's currently under Xenon.io. And basically what he was trying to do is flip SaaS companies. So take a SaaS company that didn't have enough love given to it or kind of stalled out and reinvigorate it. And so I worked with him and we flipped like 4 or 5 SaaS companies together in 2 years. Phenomenal experience. And he's like one of the most driven individuals, passionate individuals that I've ever met. And I felt like I learned more in those 2 years than I did previously. So it was an incredible opportunity to work for someone like that. Favorite startup story is probably Jane Software out of North Vancouver here in British Columbia. They have a SaaS for service providers like massage therapists. They had a negative CAC, so customer acquisition cost. So every customer that they onboarded, that customer would then recommend someone else. And so they were actually making more and more and more profit the more customers they onboarded. It was just like such an amazing product market fit.
So it ended up like taking a network effect fairly quickly or early on?
Absolutely. So it was all word of mouth. And their product just worked so well in such a niche space. I had like an assessment of the SaaS world back then that it was like the democratization of SaaS, as in anyone could have access to SaaS. So rather than like a point of sale system like Shopify that works for everyone, it's suddenly like a point of sale system for just breweries or just coffee shops or just a yoga studio. And so you had these like very customized things. And I think Jane Software did that really, really well. And they had like product market fit at the right time. And it just exploded.
Awesome. Very cool. Growing up as a kid, like 8, 9, 10 years old, what did you want to be?
It's a funny story. I always said that I wanted to be a fire truck. I just thought like the truck itself was like, it has everything it needs and it just drives around on its own. It's totally self-sufficient. I thought that was incredibly cool. On the serious side, when I think back, actually, I remember even being 12 years old thinking I want to run a business. And like I had the lemonade stand, I had the paper route, all that stuff.
So the entrepreneur blood ran early for you.
I definitely felt it early on for sure. Yeah.
This one it's an interesting question. It's a little bit more philosophical, but most painful experience. And the reason why I bring that up is, I think a lot of personal professional growth typically stems from, I think like very uncomfortable situations or situations where we're kind of like pinned or against the wall, and you have to be super creative to kind of like box your way out of it. So anything in particular can be personal, professional in terms of like painful experience, but in hindsight, you saw tremendous growth from it.
Let's do both. Personal, I actually broke my back in 2018. I was mountain biking, and I had compression fractures on T2, 3, 4, 5. So 4 of my vertebrae basically got squished like styrofoam. And I was on like I was in my backyard here mountain biking. And so it was a humbling experience because I've been mountain biking for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And in the moment, I was thinking, oh yeah, like this is just a blue trail. Like I'm a much better mountain biker than a blue trail, and had a possibly life-changing, possibly career-ending accident. And so was off the bike for 12, 13, 14 months. Very slow recovery, mentally challenging. And actually, now that I'm saying it, it actually correlates to my most professional experience that I struggled with. I got fired actually shortly after breaking my back. But you reflect a lot, and I had a lot of time because I didn't have a job and I was injured, so I was lying on the couch, and that was the doctor's orders. So the reflection and learning, obviously, first of all, getting fired, you take a ego hit, you take a confidence hit. But then when you analyze and look back and replay the story, right? Like you hit rewind on the VHS tape and you hit play again, right? You're like, what happened? How did all the chips come together to this? And it's really about fit. And now I can see it better. That the fit wasn't there. So the type of individual that I am and the type of work that I wanted to do didn't necessarily fit with that company at that time. And that's fine. That's not a reflection of me personally or the company. It's actually just in that moment there's not a fit, and that's fine. That's totally fine. It just took a long time for me to get my head around it.
I just had another guest earlier this week, got fired 3 times in between 2017 and 2018. Ended up, starting a community called Pavilion, which is like 8,000 members strong now across the world. Closed a Series A on it. It's a sales community, networking community, and but he was just speaking to that inflection point of, going through those experiences, swallowing your ego, but then what comes out of that mentally is life changing and can be life altering. And if you look back, it's like it was a blessing in disguise, I'm sure.
Yeah, you become more clear on where you can have success. And so you're able to look for those opportunities, and those opportunities will stick out a lot better. So I took Seth Godin's Alt MBA back in 2016. And I learned a couple things about ruckus makers. And I learned that just because you're up against tension and up against some kind of brick wall, it's not necessarily you. It's just you're not possibly in the right place. Like you need people around you to support change, or you need people to be okay with change happening. And so for me, the fit was incorrect. Now I've been with TIMIA for 4 years, and I have people around me who are encouraging change. And probably more importantly is seeing whether that change is for the positive or for the negative, and then make an assessment.
It's a great lead into the next question, which is, I think like starting any business is challenging. And, even though you're coming from the capital side, like, starting anything is always its own challenge. And I think like a lot of founders don't necessarily see that, but like, me working with a couple of partners here over at Mark Capital and seeing the growth of it as a VC firm, like, you know, the early days, it's from where they started, it is very much like a traditional startup. You have to go out, you got to go raise capital too. And you got to go through rigmarole of all that type of like rejection and experience and pitching and all that kind of stuff. So that being said, you talk about having your back against the wall in certain situations. What motivates you in that 25th hour to kind of like get past the hump?
So there's kind of two sides to look at this. My background actually is in SaaS. So the first SaaS company I worked for was 2010, and that kind of opened my eyes. Recently, however, like my last 3.5, 4 years have been in the capital side, providing capital to SaaS companies. And I'd have to say, like, to get something over the line, it's like to me as I feel like I am an entrepreneur, and I'm always kind of looking at two things. What is the bigger picture? There's a saying, perfect is the enemy of done.
Yeah.
So what do we just need to do to get it done?
Yeah.
Right. And what is the bigger picture?
Yeah.
So like, what do I need to do? Like, do I need to get my ego out of the way? Do I need to get other people's ego out of the way? Or like, how do I need to, like, what is that person's worldview? What are their requirements, their needs, their wants, and how can I change? How can I improve to benefit all of us moving forward?
I think the idea of perfection is sometimes, ego driven. A lot of times also fear driven. It's the philosophy of getting something to market, having it be perfect. It's in the realization that, working in, you've seen this probably tons of times where it's like, when you take things to market, it's the feedback loop that's going to evolve the product like straight out the gate. And so no matter what you think as what you've built is like market fit, it's not. It's going to got to go into that live market for it to actually dictate back to you what those changes and evolutions need to actually look like.
Once I launch, I'm going to be judged on that, right? And so, like you said, that fear that exists. Yeah. However, like, I think it's in a lean startup, Eric Ries said, launch early and launch often. That is the startup mentality, right? Iterate, continuous improvement. It's definitely an ego thing to put that aside and be able to put yourself out there and get that feedback.
Yeah.
I know actually that's one thing Jonathan taught me, is the faster you get feedback, the quicker you can learn whether or not you can generate revenue out of it, right? So like one of the first things that I always look to as a marketer is, well, let's just spend like $500. Let's spend $5,000 on Google Ads and see if we get any traction. Like, is there any initial traction for either like a new company, a new product, a new service? Is there that initial demand? And if there's not, you can very quickly move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Next question is around the idea of wearing a lot of hats, right? So you've been in the SaaS company before, you've then switched over to the capital side, but even then, like early stage, you're wearing tons of hats all the time. Any skill set that you've picked up along the way that, maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, you never thought that you would ever do, number one, but then two, had a strong emotional relationship with it, either loving it or hating it. And I know like a common one is like founders having to do the books, and that's like not something that they typically like. But anything related to that?
There's kind of 2 points that are very clear there. First of all, when I first got started into the SaaS space, I actually wanted to be a web developer. So I wanted to make it easier for people to use websites and apps. So I thought the easiest way to do that is become a web developer. So that's what I did. And then I learned that you can hire good web developers, but it's harder to find someone who can understand the business and understand a product and how to get it into someone's hands and
Mhm.
it to be user friendly. And so I was getting pushback from the people around me to specialize.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that I struggle with is, oh, do I specialize in something or do I generalize? And I always felt that generalization would be better off for myself in the long run. I think that is a necessity in the startup world, not necessarily SaaS, but in startup world, you have to be able to understand different parts of the business to be able to put it all together
Mhm.
and understand whether or not you're having success or not. Now, through that process, not necessarily the books, but a balance of intuition and analytics. A couple of years ago, when Sean Ellis popularized growth hacking,
Mhm.
there was this intense movement to data-driven growth
Mhm.
and attribution and analytics. And what I think got lost with a lot of companies is actually talking to your customers. Yes, you need to look at the finances and the analytics at the end of the day, but don't be caught up in vanity metrics. Look at the trends and then also talk to your customers.
Okay, steering away a little bit from the professional side of things, let's talk about some of the personal things in terms of, what has been some of your greatest accomplishments that you feel like so far in your life?
Interesting question. Probably the thing that I'm most proud of is like the people around me. I've had to make some hard decisions with some people in my life that, you realize that they're probably not the best people to have around.
Yeah.
And so the people that are around me and supporting me, I'm extremely proud of them. Even my coworkers,
Mhm.
I'm proud of people who I hired. I'm proud of the work that they do. Um, I'm proud of my friends and like the successes that they're having in their life. That's probably what makes me most proud is
Mm.
the people around me. Yeah.
How about one of the more ambitious items on your bucket list?
I struggle to not make this like monetary or tactile, right?
Mhm.
But one of my biggest things on my bucket list is I want to share the successes that I have with the people around me.
Mm.
So I didn't really have a strong support system when I was growing up, and I didn't have a lot of like wealthy people around me,
Mhm.
and so I want to become successful. Like I think I have partially been successful, but I have like pretty significant ambitions for
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
and I don't think I'm there yet. Will I ever be? That's another question. Like, will I ever feel like satisfied that I've like made it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe. But probably on the bucket list is being able to share my successes with other people
Mhm.
and make them feel how I wanted to feel or how I want to feel. And maybe they aren't necessarily there yet, or maybe they're on their way. Yeah, I just want to share that with people around me.
Yeah, that's a good one. Sharing the
Make
experience.
other people's lives easier is essentially what I'm getting at.
So on the journey there, obviously there's going to be stresses. Anything that you do that you go to decompress?
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. I mountain bike. I
Yeah.
still mountain bike
You
even
still
after
mountain bike?
breaking my back.
Wow.
I feel no better sense of clarity than when I'm on the trails, either by myself or with a couple of my mountain bike friends. And you need to be paying attention.
Yeah.
Because I obviously made a mistake and wasn't paying 100% attention. And I I injured myself. So when I go up now, it's like that's the only thing you focus on.
Yeah. Which is awesome to be able to have that mental disconnect from the day to day. Yeah.
And so in addition to that, what I find is I also need to take maybe 1 to 2 trips a year
Mhm.
where I'm like totally like disconnected, like not even be able to get cell service.
Yeah.
So a complete turn off for at least 4 to 5 days.
Yeah.
Because it takes 2 to 3 days to get into the mental space of, oh, like I don't have any access to the phone or communication with any other human beings. Like, this is it. So I try to take a minimum of 1, usually 2 times a year. I'm like completely inaccessible for 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get a true reset. And that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that is definitely an important thing to do. I feel like not enough people take that time to do it for themselves. You know, I think sometimes people it took me a little bit of time to get to that place where before I would feel a sense of guilt for, not working hard enough during those times. But I think it's for your mental health, for the ability to go hard on the days that you are, being there 100% for productivity purposes. You need those resets periodically throughout the year. It's just it's incredibly powerful and helpful. Awesome. The last question I have here is the idea of legacy, but more importantly, I think sometimes that word appears a little bit self-serving. So I reword it in this way, but the impact that you want to have on the world before you pass.
One of the things that I've always seen myself being able to do is provide not only myself, but the people around me a support system. And again, this is probably from how and where I was raised. And obviously I didn't grow up like in the poorest of poor areas, and I did have privilege, but it's a strange thing when you look at, like, if you look at it in different buckets, like everyone has their own worldview,
Yeah.
and everyone has their own perspective. But one thing that I always felt is I didn't have the opportunity to take as much risk as I would like to have.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'd like to provide is more people to do what they want to do without needing to worry about, well, what happens if,
Mm-hmm.
right? So let's just take my cousin, for example. She was insanely passionate about ballet, and she got into a really, really high quality school, but it's expensive. And she and her family, my family, didn't have the money to do that. And she had the opportunity in front of her. So, and she got grants, and she got, she was very talented and hardworking, and she had lots going for her. But that ability to take that extra step, take that extra leap, I would love to be able to provide that.
So that we're done with kind of the rapid fire questions, and now, I mean, I got a good sense of kind of like, where you came from and what you kind of been through. So, I think, kind of talking about, from a modest childhood and growing up, then to, going to college or university and then coming out. Like, I know you have a strong marketing background, before you started over at TIMIA. So you talk a little bit about that, and then what ultimately then drove you to go onto the capital side, coming from a SaaS background.
Yeah. So first SaaS company I worked at was Cashew, Kashoo. They're an online accounting company for small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, the iPad had just come out, becoming popular. And it was like, why don't we make an iPad app for small business owners so they can do accounting kind of like as they go, rather than at the end of the quarter or the end of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first foray into like B2B SaaS. That's when like recurring revenue, like everything went off. Like to me, everything made sense. It was like, this is the way. Doing a B2B SaaS company, that it just made total sense. And so from, I guess, 2010, 2012, going through various startups, learning about how to market, how to build a product, how to go to market, all of those things, to me, I learned a lot, but there was always a financing problem, whether it be not enough cash from customers, not enough cash from investors, or no investors. And so there was this like mysterious, how do you do that? How do you raise capital? Where do you raise capital from? What is the right type of capital, etc. And so I had been on the product SaaS side for, 8 years, 10 years maybe. And I thought, well, I don't know anything. I know very little about capital. It must be easy. It must be easy just to give away money. And so I was like, well, let's give it a go. And I didn't actually particularly go specifically look for it, but I thought to myself that's an interesting thing. I should do that next and learn what's happening on that side. And so when I got the job at TIMIA, I was thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be like the easiest job. Turns out money is the hardest thing to sell because there are loads of providers and there's really no value add. So it turns out this is like one of my hardest jobs. I had no idea how difficult it was to give away money. It's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
Way harder than any B2B SaaS company, way harder than any product.
Is it part of like finding the right deals, or is it the competitive landscape for equity? Or sorry, for capital?
You can take a B2B SaaS company and identify your market and pitch features and benefits all day.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of features and benefits to money. So what's interesting about the capital business is not only are you trying to find a company that is ready and willing and able to take capital. So it's timing. Timing is a huge thing, but it's also the type of capital for what purpose. So you have all of these different alignments, right? The different reasons, these different purposes, they all have to align correctly. And the entrepreneur, the business needs to be comfortable with that cost of capital as well. Because every piece of capital you take has a cost to it, whether it be equity, whether it be debt, it doesn't matter. There is a cost to it. And there's a fit. And so finding that fit is incredibly difficult because everyone has their own idea of how much it's going to cost, what I'm going to use it for, who's providing it, and do I like that person? Are they comfortable with the business that I'm running? Are they comfortable with the industry that I'm in? What is their expectations? What are my expectations? And so there's a lot at play.
Yeah, for sure. What are some of the qualifiers that you guys look for in companies? I know you mentioned, AR, but outside of that, is there any other, qualifying questions that you guys typically ask out front just to make sure that there is going to be a semblance of a fit going down that path?
One of the things that I like about the people that I work with and our process is we like to say no early and often. And what's strong about that is you don't waste anyone's time and you can get to success quite quickly with a company, with people. And so we've got we've drilled it down into 3 very straightforward processes because we've figured out the least amount of questions to ask at every stage. So if I jump on a call with you and you're running a B2B SaaS company, I'll ask you right off the top, like, what's your revenue? What's your growth expectations? How much are you planning to burn? What's your gross margin? What's your churn? And we can move from there.
From the founder perspective, typically, what is the motivating factor for them to end up working with TIMIA? Have you seen any kind of themes or trends around that?
Yeah, so there's 4 themes that are pretty obvious. The first one is quite straightforward. It's growing your valuation.
Yeah.
So if you are a smaller recurring revenue company, let's say you're like $2, $3, $4 million a year, and you're looking at doing a Series A or any equity raise for that matter, you want to put yourself in the best position. The problem is the multiples that you get, the valuation that you get when you're at that size aren't as attractive as if, let's say, you're a $6 or $8 million company.
Yeah.
There's a dramatic increase in valuations during that period. And so we want to help companies go from being that smaller $2 to $4 million SaaS company to being a more mature let's say $12 million company.
That being said, I think like, just leading up to kind of the end of the conversation as we're kind of like gearing up on the time here, where do you imagine TIMIA to be in the next 5 years, and or your role within TIMIA too? Like, where do you see this is like this is the home, this is the place where you want to be now for long term, and or is this something where you feel like it's a great learning environment, and it's something that you want to take a lot of those skills and knowledge base to apply to something else down the road for yourself?
Yeah, so I'm coming up on 4 years here, Chris, with TIMIA, and I actually am surprised and humbled and excited that I'm coming up to 4 years. And I think what we're doing to be able to provide entrepreneurs an opportunity to keep control and ownership of their business is an extremely, extremely strong position to be in. And so what I see happening over the next 5 years is not only that we're able to provide more capital to more software companies, but also expanding our market. So we've already begun this, but providing capital to companies that have recurring revenue that aren't true SaaS companies. Basically, we're expanding out. Yep. Giving different types of companies the credit that they deserve from growing their business. So rather than taking equity dollars, using debt to get where they want to be. Mm-hmm. And so we're being more creative internally on finding types of companies, not necessarily industries, just types of revenue models that don't have the credit that they deserve.
Awesome. I really like that idea and that model. So, I mean, I think, looking forward to kind of seeing where that goes. Yeah. Speaking back to that point around, expanding the revenue models that you guys are pursuing or willing to take a look at. What are some of those types of companies look like in terms of like a profile perspective?
Companies that are incredibly sticky, mm-hmm. don't get the credit that they deserve. Mm-hmm. So a lot of companies now are turning to a product-led growth model and a usage-based pricing model. And no one's really figured out how to do debt for those types of companies.
I see.
Let's just take usage-based pricing, for example. How can you predict that someone that purchased before is going to purchase again? Mm-hmm. That's a nut that's yet to be cracked. There's so many VCs that are giving huge valuations, huge rounds into the product-led growth space. But I don't know, it's too early to tell whether that's actually the right way to grow. There's loads of entrepreneurs, influencers, VCs who are pushing this way. But it's really attractive for VCs because they can say, hey, go spend all this money trying to figure out the product, and your customers will come. But at the end of the day, these VCs, if you look at their balance sheets and you look at their returns, they're making incredibly strong returns on the one or two companies that have become the unicorn, the decacorn. Is that the right way to build a company? And can you do it with less equity and keep more control of your company? I would love to be able to figure that out.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we do wish to see how you go about figuring that out in the next few years. But that's awesome. I really, I can appreciate the concept of what you're pursuing. And I think that's very interesting and very creative path in terms of when you talk about financing and capital. So very cool. It's really educational, just kind of have a different perspective on financing outside of, I think, what traditionally founders are thinking about. And so, we have a lot of SaaS founders that really tune into this. And so this is a great opportunity for them to find another trajectory to go down, especially given the 4 specific use cases that you shared with us. So if any of them are listening to this, I'll have them make sure to reach out, and we'll have a link to your site as part of the streaming platforms that we are posting this to. So
Great.
awesome.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
It's very easy to find. TIMIA capital.com, TIMIAcapital.com.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I wish you nothing but success in the next few years, and looking forward to seeing where you guys end up.